Some invitations prove we've moved on. Others arrive as desperate prayers. When Holden Carmichael invited his first love to his wedding, he wanted closure. What he got was a 5-year-old girl with his eyes and a truth that would shatter everything he'd built. The morning of Holden Carmichael's wedding began with a lie. "You look happy," his mother said, adjusting his bow tie with practiced efficiency in the ornate preparation suite of Riverside Country Club. Holden met her eyes in the gilded mirror. Margaret Carmichael had a way of seeing through him that no amount of expensive suits or controlled expressions could hide. At 62, she still carried herself with the grace of someone who'd spent decades navigating high society, but her eyes, those sharp, knowing eyes, had never lost their ability to cut through pretense. "I am happy," he responded, and the words felt hollow even as they formed on his tongue. His mother's hands paused for just a fraction of a second, barely perceptible, but Holden caught it. That tiny hesitation spoke volumes. "Victoria is a wonderful woman," Margaret continued carefully, smoothing invisible wrinkles from his tuxedo jacket. "Beautiful, accomplished, from a good family, everything one could want in a wife." "But," Holden prompted, recognizing the unspoken qualifier. Margaret stepped back, studying her son with an expression that mixed concern with something else. Sadness, maybe. "But I remember when you used to get nervous before big moments, excited. Your father always said you had this energy before important events, like electricity running through you." She tilted her head slightly. "Now you just look prepared, controlled." "Isn't that better?" Holden asked, adjusting his cufflinks, another nervous habit he'd never quite broken. Preparation over emotion is what built Carmichael Investments into one of the top firms in the Northeast. Emotion clouds judgment, Mom. It makes people reckless. "I'm not talking about your business, sweetheart." Margaret's voice softened in that particular way that always made him feel like he was 10 years old again, seeking comfort after skinning his knee. "I'm talking about your heart. About whether you're marrying Victoria because you love her or because she makes sense on paper." Before Holden could formulate a response, some carefully crafted deflection about strategic thinking and long-term planning, a knock interrupted them. Marcus Reynolds, his best man since their Harvard days, poked his head through the mahogany door. "Sorry to interrupt this mother-son moment, but Holden, you have a visitor. Says it's important." "Marcus, I'm getting married in 2 hours," Holden said, glancing at his watch. "Unless the venue is literally on fire or someone's broken a limb, it can wait." "It's Brooke Ashford." The name hit Holden like a physical blow, stealing the air from his lungs. For a moment, the elegant preparation suite seemed to tilt slightly. He watched his mother's expression shift from curious to deeply concerned in the span of a single heartbeat. "Brooke," Margaret breathed, her hand moving unconsciously to her pearl necklace, a gesture she made when genuinely surprised. After all these years, why would she come now? 6 years. It had been 6 years since Holden had seen Brooke, since their relationship had imploded in a spectacular collision of pride, misunderstanding, and words that couldn't be taken back. 6 years since he'd accused her of being with him for his money and connections. 6 years since she'd thrown his grandmother's engagement ring back at him with such force it had cracked against the wall of his penthouse. "You invited her, didn't you?" Margaret's voice carried no judgment, only that infuriating maternal intuition that made lying to her impossible. He had. 3 months ago, in what Victoria had diplomatically called a gesture of maturity and closure, he'd sent Brooke a wedding invitation. It was supposed to be proof that he'd moved on, that their painful past no longer held any power over him. Proof that he'd built something better, more stable, more appropriate. "I never actually thought she'd come," Holden admitted quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was just supposed to be symbolic. Show her I harbor no ill will." "Then you don't know her as well as you thought you did," Margaret observed, a hint of something that might have been approval in her tone. "That girl always had more courage than anyone gave her credit for, Even when it terrified her, she faced things head-on. Marcus cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Listen, man, she's waiting on the south terrace. And—" he hesitated, his expression troubled. "She's not alone." Something in Marcus's tone, a careful neutrality that spoke volumes, made Holden's stomach twist into knots. "What do you mean, not alone? Did she bring a date?" Even as he said it, the thought twisted something inside him. "You really should see for yourself, Holden," Marcus said quietly. "Trust me on this one." The walk to the south terrace felt endless, each step echoing against the marble floors of the historic country club. Through the tall windows, Holden could see the wedding preparations unfolding like a carefully choreographed performance. White chairs arranged in geometrically perfect rows on the manicured lawn, massive floral arrangements of white roses and peonies being positioned just so. Staff members in crisp uniforms making final adjustments to table settings that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. 200 guests. The perfect venue, the perfect bride from the perfect family, the perfect life he'd constructed so meticulously over the past 6 years. So why did his hands feel clammy? Why was his heart racing like he'd just sprinted up a flight of stairs? The south terrace was quieter, tucked away from the main ceremony preparations. It overlooked the rose garden, where Victoria had insisted they take their first look photos later that afternoon. Everything about this wedding had been meticulously planned, down to the minute. Every detail calculated for maximum elegance, every moment designed to project success and tradition. Nothing in his extensive planning had prepared him for what he saw when he pushed through the French doors. Brooke stood with her back to him, her posture rigid in a simple navy dress that was elegant without trying to compete with the wedding's grandeur. Her dark hair was shorter now, cut in a practical bob that somehow made her look both more mature and more vulnerable at the same time. Even from behind, he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she was holding herself together through sheer force of will. But it wasn't Brooke that made Holden's feet freeze to the stone terrace. It was the little girl holding her hand. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old, wearing a white sundress with delicate flowers embroidered along the hem. Her dark curls were pulled back with a simple headband, and she was studying the rose garden with the intense focus children sometimes have when they're processing new surroundings, trying to understand where they are and why. Then the child turned around, and Holden felt his entire world shift on its axis. The girl had his eyes. Not just a similar color, they were identical. That specific shade of hazel with the unusual gold flecks that ran through the Carmichael bloodline like a genetic signature. His grandmother's eyes staring out from photographs 60 years old. His mother's eyes that had watched him grow up. His own eyes that looked back at him from the mirror every morning. But it was more than just the eyes. The shape of her small face, the slight dimple that appeared in her left cheek when her expression changed, the way her eyebrows drew together in that particular combination of curiosity and caution. She was a living mirror of the photographs in his mother's meticulously maintained family albums, the ones showing him at exactly that age, grinning gap-toothed at birthday parties and family gatherings. This child was a Carmichael. There was no mistaking it. "Hello, Holden." Brooke's voice was steady, but trembling underneath. She looked exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "Brooke." His voice came out rough. His eyes kept darting to the child. 5 years old, 6 years since they'd broken up. It couldn't be. "I know I shouldn't have come," Brooke continued. "I know this is your wedding day. I'm sorry for the timing." "Who is this?" His voice cracked. The little girl looked up at him with those impossible eyes. "This is Ivy," Brooke said softly. "Ivy Carmichael. Your daughter." The words echoed. Somewhere distant, the string quartet practiced Pachelbel's canon. "That's not possible," he said, "but those eyes, that face," the timeline matched perfectly. "Mommy, I'm thirsty," Ivy said quietly, tugging Brooke's hand. Her voice was hoarse in a way that sent alarm bells ringing. "I know, baby. Just a few more minutes, okay?" Brooke's voice softened. "Why?" The single word was all Holden could manage. "Why didn't you tell me? Why now?" Brooke understood. "Because I was angry. Because you called me a gold digger. Because when I found out I was pregnant, you'd already blocked my number and made it clear you wanted nothing to do with me." Her eyes held only profound sadness now. "Because I was proud and stupid and convinced I could do it alone. 6 years. She's been alive 6 years and you never told me." "I tried." Brooke's composure cracked. 2 months after she was born, I showed up at your office. Your assistant said you were meeting with the Bellamy family. She made it clear Mr. Carmichael didn't have time for former acquaintances seeking handouts. The Bellamy meeting. That was when he'd first met Victoria. "So you just gave up? One attempt?" "Lower your voice," Brooke said sharply, hand moving protectively to Ivy's head. The child pressed against her mother's leg, wide-eyed. Holden forced himself to breathe. "You still haven't told me why you're here. Why today?" Brooke's expression shifted, something that looked like fear. "Because Ivy is sick," she said, her voice breaking. "She has acute lymphoblastic leukemia. She needs a bone marrow transplant, and I'm not a match." Tears slid down her cheeks. "The donor registry hasn't found anyone. Her best chance is a biological relative. And since my parents are gone and I'm an only child—" She swallowed hard. "You're her only hope." The terrace felt too small, his perfect world crumbling. "That's why I'm here," Brooke continued, wiping her tears. "Not to ruin your wedding, not to demand anything, just to ask if you'd be willing to get tested, to see if you could save our daughter's life. Our daughter." "Mr. Carmichael," a staff member appeared. "Miss Bellamy is asking—" He stopped, noticing the tension, the tears, the child with Carmichael eyes. "I can tell her you're busy." "Yes, tell her I need a few more minutes." As the man retreated, Holden really looked at Brooke. The dark circles, the way her dress hung loose, the tremor in her hands. This wasn't the vibrant medical student he'd loved. This was a woman fighting alone, watching her child suffer, and between them stood a little girl with his eyes, completely unaware she'd just detonated his life. "I don't know what to say," Holden admitted. Brooke nodded. "You don't have to say anything today. Just think about it. Here's my number." She pulled a card with shaking hands. "And Holden, I'm sorry about the timing. I wouldn't have come if your daughter wasn't dying." "If our daughter wasn't dying," Brooke corrected gently. She looked down at Ivy, smoothing her curls. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's go." As they turned, Ivy looked back. "Are you the man from Mommy's photo? The one she looks at when she thinks I'm sleeping?" The question stole his breath. Brooke's face flushed, but she didn't deny it. She took her daughter's hand and walked away, leaving Holden alone with a business card and the sound of wedding preparations continuing, like nothing had changed. Everything had changed. In 2 hours, he was supposed to marry Victoria Bellamy in front of 200 guests, a wedding representing stability, social advancement, a future free from chaos. Instead, he stood in the rose garden, staring at a phone number, processing that he was a father, that a little girl with his eyes was fighting for her life, that his perfect life was an illusion. The string quartet finished their sound check, and Holden remained frozen while his wedding day marched forward. He had 2 hours to decide what kind of man he wanted to be. The question was, did he have the courage to choose honestly? Holden stood frozen on the terrace long after Brooke and Ivy disappeared. The business card in his hand felt impossibly heavy, as if it weighed more than any contract he'd ever signed. A daughter. He had a daughter. The words kept cycling through his mind, refusing to become real. Holden. His mother's voice cut through the fog. She'd followed him, moving quietly. Who was that child? He turned to face her, and something in his expression gave him away, because Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Those eyes. That little girl looked exactly like you at that age. Her name is Ivy." His voice sounded distant. "Ivy Carmichael. Brooke says she's mine." "Says?" Margaret's eyebrows rose sharply. There's no says about it. That child is a Carmichael. Holden sank onto one of the ornate benches, his head falling into his hands. She never told me. 6 years, Mum. Margaret sat beside him, her hand finding his shoulder. Why now? Why today? The child is sick, leukemia. She needs a bone marrow transplant and Brooke isn't a match. I'm apparently Ivy's best chance. Dear God. Margaret's hand tightened on his shoulder. That poor baby. And poor Brooke, having to come to you after everything. Something in his mother's tone made Holden look up sharply. You're taking her side. She kept my daughter from me. I'm not taking sides, but I remember how things ended. The things you said. The accusations. She paused, her eyes reflecting a pain that went deeper than this moment. You were convinced she was with you for your money. You cut her out completely, because she was acting exactly like someone in love who wanted to build a life with you. Margaret interrupted gently. Holden, sweetheart, I've watched you build walls around your heart for years. Ever since your father's second wife showed her true colors, you've been so afraid of being used that you've forgotten how to trust. The words cut deep because they were true. She tried to tell me, Holden admitted quietly, the guilt washing over him fresh and raw. 2 months after Ivy was born, my assistant turned her away. And you never knew? I'd given strict instructions. Anyone from my old life was to be refused access. He laughed bitterly, the sound hollow in the morning air. I was so focused on proving I didn't need Brooke, on showing the world I was better off without her, that I shut out the possibility she might have a legitimate reason to reach out. Margaret was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. Do you know what I see when I look at that child? What I saw in just those few seconds? Holden shook his head, not trusting his voice. I see you at 5 years old. That same stubborn determination in her eyes, even when she was scared. That same way of observing everything, taking it all in. Margaret's hand trembled slightly on his shoulder. That's my granddaughter, Holden. My granddaughter, who I never got to meet, never got to hold, never got to spoil the way grandmothers are supposed to. 6 years of birthday parties and Christmas mornings and bedtime stories that I missed because of pride and fear. The grief in his mother's voice made Holden's chest tighten. He hadn't thought about what this meant for her, how Brooke's silence had robbed her of being a grandmother, just as it had robbed him of being a father. I'm so sorry, Mom. Don't apologize to me. Margaret's voice firmed. Save your apologies for that little girl and her mother. They're the ones who've been carrying this burden. What are you going to do? Before Holden could answer, another voice cut through the air, sharp and displeased. Holden, what on earth is going on? Victoria Bellamy stood in the doorway, resplendent in cream silk and cashmere. Her blonde hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless. She looked every inch the perfect society bride. And in that moment, Holden realized he felt nothing. No butterflies, no excitement. Just a vague sense of obligation and the sinking feeling that he was about to ruin everything. Victoria, we need to talk. Her eyebrows drew together. Now? The ceremony is in less than 2 hours. It really can't wait. Margaret excused herself quietly, squeezing Holden's shoulder once more. Follow your heart, sweetheart, not your fear. Once alone, Victoria stepped onto the terrace, heels clicking sharply. What's this about? Brooke was here. Victoria's expression flickered. Your ex, what did she want? She came to tell me I have a daughter. The words hung between them like a grenade. Victoria's face went through several expressions, shock, disbelief, anger, finally settling into something cold. A daughter. You have a child you never mentioned? I didn't know. Brooke never told me. She's been raising our daughter alone for 6 years. How convenient. She shows up on our wedding day, and you just believe her. The child has my eyes, Victoria, my face. There's no question. Then why now? Why today? Victoria's voice rose. This is clearly a ploy to disrupt our wedding. The child has leukemia. Holden cut her off. She needs a bone marrow transplant. I might be her only chance." That stopped Victoria mid-sentence. Genuine emotion flickered across her face, sympathy perhaps, but it was quickly replaced by control. "That's terrible, truly awful. But Holden, you need to think clearly. We can't let this derail everything." "Everything we've built?" Something in her phrasing struck him as wrong. "Victoria, a little girl is dying. My daughter. And I'm sympathetic. We can help her. You can get tested after the honeymoon, arrange for doctors, set up a trust, but letting this destroy what we've created together. What have we created?" The question came out before he could stop it. "Be honest. What is this marriage really about?" Her eyes narrowed. "What kind of question is that?" "A legitimate one. Do you love me? Really love me? Or do you love being Mrs. Holden Carmichael? The position, the connections, the influence? "I can't believe you're asking me this now," Victoria said. But she didn't answer. She never answered. "We make sense together. Our families are aligned, our goals complementary. That's more important than fleeting emotion. My mother said she remembers when I used to get excited about big moments," Holden said quietly, "when I felt things. I told her preparation was better than emotion. And you were right. Look at what emotional decisions did with Brooke, drama and pain. We're stable. We're empty." Saying it aloud felt like releasing something trapped in his chest. "When was the last time we talked about something other than wedding plans or business? When did we last laugh together?" Victoria's face flushed. "This is ridiculous. You're having cold feet because your ex showed up. It's not a sob story. It's a child. My child, a little girl who asked if I was the man from her mother's photograph, the one her mother looks at when she thinks her daughter is sleeping." That detail hit Victoria differently. She looked scared. "Don't do this," she said, voice losing its edge. "We've invested so much. I don't care about the money. But you do, don't you? The Bellamy family might have pedigree, but you need the Carmichael fortune." "How dare you?" Victoria hissed, but there was no real heat in it, just desperate anger that confirmed everything. "Your family is mortgaged to the hilt. I've seen the numbers. This marriage was supposed to solve that, wasn't it?" Victoria's composure finally shattered. "And what's wrong with that? People have married for practical reasons for centuries." "No, but it makes it not enough. Not for me, not anymore." The silence was broken by distant wedding preparations, staff calling, music being tested. "You're calling off the wedding," Victoria said flatly. "I can't marry you today, not knowing I have a daughter who needs me." He paused. "And honestly, Victoria, I don't think you want to marry me either. Not really. You want what I represent." She stared at him, emotions playing across her face. "You're going to look like a fool. Everyone will assume you're running back to your ex. Let them assume what they want." Victoria nodded slowly. "I'll tell my parents you got cold feet. Family emergency. Something believable. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm doing it for my own reputation." She turned, then paused. "For what it's worth, I hope your daughter is okay. Children shouldn't suffer for their parents' mistakes." Then she was gone, leaving Holden alone with the ruins of his perfect life scattered around him. He should feel devastated. Instead, he felt relief. And underneath that relief, a fierce determination. He had a daughter who needed him. Holden pulled out his phone and stared at the business card. He began typing. "I'm coming to see you today. We need to talk. About Ivy. About everything. I want to get tested as soon as possible. Whatever she needs, I'm here now." He hit send. The response came fast. 3 words. "She needs you." Another message from Brooke. "Pediatric oncology clinic near General Hospital. Dr. Sarah Chen is Ivy's specialist. I can have them expecting you Monday morning." Monday, 2 days before he could start trying to save his daughter's life. He typed back, "Monday morning. I'll be there. Can I come by tomorrow to meet her properly?" The pause felt eternal. "Let me talk to her first. This is a lot for her. She's sick. She's been through so much. I need to prepare her. If he was a match, if the transplant worked, if Ivy survived, then what? He'd have a daughter, A real daughter who would need a father. The thought terrified and exhilarated him. Another message. But yes, tomorrow afternoon, around 2, Riverside Garden Apartments, Building C, Unit 312. Riverside Garden. Modest housing on the edge of the medical district. The contrast with his penthouse felt obscene. "I'll be there at 2, he typed. "Thank you, Brooke." Her response, she deserves to know her father. That's what matters now. Holden dialed Marcus. Change of plans. The wedding is cancelled. Family emergency. Jesus, Holden, are you sure? Victoria's family. I'm sure. I've never been more sure. I have a daughter, Marcus, a daughter I never knew existed, and she's sick. Long pause. Then quietly, "Okay, I'll handle the calls. Thank you. For everything. Oh, that's what best friends are for. And your mom's been worried about you for months." Had he been? The endless business dinners, the wedding planning like a merger, the nights falling asleep in his study. When was the last time he'd felt genuine joy? He couldn't remember. "Tell my mother I'm going to be a while." She already left. Said something about an errand. Odd, but nothing about this day had gone according to plan. Holden made his way to the parking garage. He sat behind the wheel, not starting the engine, just breathing. In 2 hours, his entire life had turned upside down. He'd discovered a daughter, called off his wedding, acknowledged his perfect life was a facade. And yet, sitting in the quiet darkness, Holden felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Fragile and frightening, mixed with guilt, but real. More real than anything in 6 years. He had a daughter. Tomorrow, he would meet her. Monday, he would find out if he could save her life. And beyond that, if luck and medicine were kind, he would have the chance to be the father she deserved, the father he should have been all along. Holden started the engine, leaving behind the country club, leaving behind the life he'd thought he wanted, driving towards something unknown and terrifying and absolutely necessary, driving toward his daughter. Holden stood outside Building C of Riverside Garden Apartments at 1:55 p.m., staring at the door. In his hands, a small gift bag containing a book about stars and constellations. He'd spent 2 hours that morning in 3 different bookstores, paralyzed by overwhelming choices, second-guessing every selection. Now, standing in the modest courtyard with its struggling flower beds and playground equipment, he wondered if he'd made a mistake. What did a 5-year-old with leukemia want with astronomy? What did he know about being a father at all? His phone buzzed. His mother. "Breathe, sweetheart. Just be yourself. That's all she needs." How did Margaret always know exactly when he needed her? Holden took a deep breath, straightened his jacket. He'd chosen jeans and a button-down, trying to look casual, but still felt overdressed, and pressed the buzzer for Unit 312. "Come on up," Brooke's voice crackled. "3rd floor." No elevator. Holden climbed slowly, giving himself time to prepare for meeting his daughter. How did you prepare for something like this? What did you say to a child who had no idea you existed until yesterday? Unit 312 was at the end of a dim hallway that smelled faintly of cooking spices. The door was painted cheerful yellow. A small wreath of paper flowers hung at eye level. Clearly a child's craft project. The door opened before he could knock. Brooke stood there, different than yesterday, more relaxed in jeans and an oversized sweater, her hair in a messy ponytail, no makeup. She looked exhausted and beautiful and terrifyingly real. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi." His voice came out rough. "I'm not late." "Exactly on time. You always were punctual." A ghost of a smile. "Come in. She's been asking about you all morning." That statement hit harder than any business negotiation. His daughter had been asking about him, wondering what he'd be like, maybe imagining if he'd like her. What if he disappointed her? The apartment was small but cozy. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator. Medical pamphlets sat on the coffee table next to a pill organizer. The space was meticulously clean, but carried signs of careful economy. Mismatched furniture, repaired items. "She's in her room," Brooke said, wringing her hands. I told her you're her father, that you didn't know about her before, but now you do." She paused, eyes intense. "Holden, she's excited but scared. She doesn't understand everything about what's happening to her body, but she knows she's sick." "I understand. Do you?" Brooke's voice sharpened. "She's not just a medical problem to solve. She's a little girl who's been through more in 5 years than most people face in a lifetime. She's brave and funny and so damn smart. But she's also fragile right now." The fierce protectiveness reminded Holden why he'd fallen in love with her. "I'm not here to hurt her," Holden said quietly. "Or you. I'm here because she's my daughter, and I want to know her." Brooke studied his face, then nodded. "Okay, come on." She led him to a door decorated with hand-drawn stars and moons. Brooke knocked softly. "Ivy, someone's here to see you." "Is it him?" The small voice made Holden's chest tighten. "Is it my daddy?" My daddy. 2 words that undid something fundamental inside him. Brooke opened the door, and Holden got his first real look at his daughter's world. The room was small, barely big enough for a twin bed and dresser, but every inch had been made magical. Glow-in-the-dark stars covered the ceiling in constellation patterns. Drawings papered the walls. A mobile of paper butterflies hung from the ceiling, turning slowly. And in the middle of the bed, propped by pillows, sat Ivy. She looked smaller than at the country club, swallowed by an oversized unicorn sweater, her dark curls pulled back with a flower headband. She had a coloring book on her lap, abandoned to stare at Holden with those impossible hazel eyes, his eyes, holding curiosity, hope, and uncertainty. "Hi," Holden managed, barely above a whisper. "Hi, Ivy. You're really my daddy?" Direct, cutting through any pretense. "I am." Holden moved closer, then stopped, unsure. "I know this is confusing. I'm sorry I didn't know about you before. If I had known, I would have been here." Ivy tilted her head, studying him. "Mommy says you're important, that you have a big job." "I have a job, yes, but it's not as important as being here with you." "Mommy also says you might help me get better." Her voice was matter-of-fact, but he caught the tremor. "I'm sick. Do you know that?" "I know." Holden knelt beside the bed at her eye level. "And I'm going to do everything I can to help you." "Do you promise?" The question held the solemnity of someone much older. "Because Mommy says we shouldn't make promises we can't keep." He wanted to promise her everything, but Brooke had taught their daughter to value honesty. "I promise that I'm going to try my hardest," Holden said carefully. "Tomorrow, I'm seeing a doctor who will test if I can help you. And no matter what happens, I promise I'm not going anywhere. You're my daughter, and I want to be part of your life." Ivy considered this. Then she noticed the gift bag. "Did you bring me something?" "I did, but you don't have to like it." She reached for it with hands that trembled slightly, side effects from treatment. Inside, she found the astronomy book, and her face lit up. "Stars!" She opened it carefully. "Look, Mommy, it has all the constellations." "Your daddy picked well," Brooke said softly, and there was something in her voice. She was crying silent tears as she watched their daughter's excitement. "Mommy and I love stars," Ivy explained. "We have them on my ceiling. She says that even when we can't see someone we love, they're still there, like stars behind clouds." The metaphor hit Holden squarely in the chest. How many nights had Ivy looked up at those ceiling stars while Brooke explained why she didn't have a father? "That's beautiful," Holden said, voice thick. "Your mom is very smart." "She's the smartest," Ivy agreed. Then with typical child subject changes, "Can you read to me? I'm not supposed to strain my eyes too much." "I'd love to." Holden glanced at Brooke, who nodded. "I'll make some tea," she said. "Give you two some time." As Brooke left, Holden settled carefully on the edge of Ivy's bed, the book open between them. She scooted closer without hesitation, leaning against his side. She smelled like children's shampoo and something medicinal. She was warm and solid and real, and Holden was terrified of holding her too tight and simultaneously afraid she might disappear. "This one," Ivy said, pointing to Orion. "Mommy says that's the hunter, and he's brave." Holden began reading. Ivy interrupted frequently with questions, her quick mind making connections between constellations and stories. She was, Holden realized with fierce pride, brilliant. "You know a lot about stars," he observed. "Mommy teaches me. She says learning is important even when you're sick. Your mind can travel even when your body can't." Ivy looked up at him, her next question quieter. "Were you sad when you found out I was sick?" The question gutted him. "I was sad," Holden admitted, "and scared, and angry at myself for not being here before." "It's not your fault," Ivy said with certainty. "Mommy explained you didn't know about me. That's different from not wanting me." The wisdom in those words made Holden's eyes burn. "Your mum is right. I didn't know. But Ivy, now that I do know, I'm not going anywhere. Whether I can help you medically or not, I'm your father, and I want to be in your life. If that's okay with you." Ivy studied him. "Will you come back? After today?" "Yes, as often as you want me to." "What about when I'm better? When I don't need you for the medical stuff?" The question revealed what this 5-year-old had learned about conditional love. It broke something in Holden. "Especially then," he said firmly. "Ivy, being your father isn't about fixing what's wrong. It's about being there for everything. The good stuff and the hard stuff and the boring everyday stuff." She seemed satisfied and picked up the book. "Can we keep reading? I like your voice. It's deep, like thunder, but not scary thunder. Good thunder." Holden laughed, genuine and rusty. "Good thunder. I'll take that as a compliment." They read for another 20 minutes, Ivy growing quieter as exhaustion caught up. Holden noticed her yawning, fighting to keep her eyes open even as her head drooped against his shoulder. "Am I boring you?" he asked gently. "No," she mumbled. "I'm just tired. I'm tired a lot now." The simple statement broke his heart. 5 years old and already apologizing for something beyond her control. "Then maybe you should rest. But then you'll leave." The fear was palpable, raw, and real. "Everyone leaves when I'm sleeping." "I'll stay until you fall asleep," Holden promised, his voice thick. "And I'll come back tomorrow after I see the doctor. And the day after that. And the day after that." Ivy nodded, her breathing evening out. "That's good. I think I'm glad you're my daddy." The words hit him with physical force. This tiny person, this miracle he hadn't known existed, was glad he was her father, despite everything, despite his absence, despite the circumstances, despite knowing him for less than an hour. "I'm glad too," he whispered. "So very glad." Within minutes, Ivy was asleep against him, her small body relaxed and trusting. Holden sat absolutely frozen, afraid the slightest movement would wake her, would break whatever fragile magic had allowed him into her life so easily. Her breathing was soft and even, occasionally interrupted by the smallest snore that made his chest ache with tenderness. Brooke appeared in the doorway. She moved quietly and gently shifted Ivy onto her pillows, tucking her in with practiced ease. "Come on," she whispered, "let her sleep." In the living room, Holden finally allowed himself to breathe. His hands were shaking. "She's incredible," he said, voice rough. "Brooke, she's absolutely incredible." "She is." Brooke handed him tea. "She liked you." "That's not always guaranteed. She's usually cautious with new people." "I can't believe how smart she is." "She gets that from you," Brooke said quietly. "That analytical mind, the way she needs to understand how things work." They sat in awkward silence, 6 years of unsaid things hanging between them. "Thank you," Holden finally said, "for letting me see her, for not turning me away. She deserves to know her father." Brooke's voice carried no bitterness, only tired resignation. "I should have found a way to tell you sooner. I was just—" She trailed off. "Just what?" "Afraid," Brooke admitted. "Afraid you'd reject her like you rejected me. Afraid you'd make promises you couldn't keep and break her heart." She looked up at him. "But watching you with her just now, I remembered something. You've never been cruel. When you commit to something, you see it through. I'm committed to her," Holden said firmly, "and to making up for lost time." Brooke nodded. The appointment tomorrow is at 9 a.m. Dr. Chen's office, fourth floor of the medical building next to General Hospital. I'll be there. As Holden stood to leave, Brooke walked him to the door. Holden, whatever happens with the medical stuff, just keep showing up. That's what she needs most. Consistency. Someone who doesn't disappear when things get hard. I won't disappear, Holden promised. Not again. He left the apartment and made it halfway down the stairs before he had to stop, his legs unsteady. He sat on the concrete steps, put his head in his hands, and finally let himself cry. For all the time he'd lost, for the daughter he'd never known, for the battle ahead, and for the small miracle of a 5-year-old who'd called him Daddy and meant it. The pediatric oncology clinic smelled like antiseptic and hope. Holden sat in the waiting room at 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes early, watching families in various stages of their medical journeys. A mother comforted a bald toddler. An older couple held hands silently. A teenager scrolled through her phone, hiding fear behind boredom. This was Ivy's world. These sterile hallways, uncomfortable chairs, careful smiles from nurses. For 6 years, Brooke had navigated this alone. Mr. Carmichael? A nurse appeared. Dr. Chen will see you now. Dr. Sarah Chen's office was surprisingly warm. Family photos, children's drawings, a struggling plant on the windowsill. She stood as Holden entered, extending her hand. Mr. Carmichael, thank you for coming so quickly. Maybe 40, with kind eyes that had seen too much suffering. Please, sit. Holden sat, hands gripping the armrests. How is she? Ivy? How bad is it, really? Dr. Chen's expression shifted to gentle honesty. Ivy has acute lymphoblastic leukemia. It's the most common childhood leukemia, which sounds terrible until you realize it's also one of the most treatable. But she needs a bone marrow transplant. She does. She responded well initially to chemotherapy, but she's had a relapse. Her best chance now is an allogeneic stem cell transplant from a matched donor. Dr. Chen pulled up images. Her mother isn't a match, and the registry hasn't found a suitable donor. Biological relatives offer the best odds. And if we're not a match, then we continue searching, expand the registry, try experimental treatments. Dr. Chen's voice was steady. But I won't lie to you. Time is a factor. Every day we wait, her body weakens. The weight pressed down on Holden. What do we do first? Blood work. We'll test your HLA typing. Results typically take 3 to 5 days. 3 to 5 days of not knowing if he could save his daughter's life. The blood draw took less than 10 minutes. Holden watched his blood fill vial after vial, each potentially holding the answer to whether his daughter would live or die. The nurse worked with efficient gentleness. "You're doing a good thing," she said. "A lot of fathers don't show up." The casual comment hit hard. How easily he might have been one of those absent fathers. Holden left the clinic and sat in his car, staring at his phone. 3 to 5 days. How was he supposed to function when his daughter's life hung in balance? His phone rang. Brooke. How did it go? They took blood. 3 to 5 days for results. That long? The despair in those 2 words gutted him. They'll rush it. Maybe sooner. Holden gripped the steering wheel. How's Ivy? She's okay this morning, asking about you. A pause. You don't have to come today. I know you have your business. I'm coming, he interrupted. I told Ivy I'd be there, and I will be. The relief in Brooke's voice was audible. Any time. We're not going anywhere. Holden drove home first, needing to clear his head. The penthouse felt emptier than usual. He'd spent years building this life, and for what? None of it mattered compared to a 5-year-old's smile. His phone buzzed with messages, Marcus asking about meetings, cancelled wedding vendors. Holden deleted them all except one from his mother. Coming to see my granddaughter today. Don't try to stop me. Arriving at noon. He arrived at Riverside Garden at 11. Brooke answered, looking exhausted. Rough night? She had pain. The medication helps, but she hates feeling foggy. Brooke stepped aside. She's in her room working on something. Holden knocked softly. Hey there, can I come in? Daddy! The joy made his chest ache. She was cross-legged on her bed, surrounded by crayons and paper. Look what I'm making! Daddy. He'd never tire of that word. What are you working on? A picture for you, see? That's you, that's me, that's Mommy. Stick figures under a sky of stars. And that's us being a family. The meaning was crystal clear. Ivy was creating the family she'd never had, putting it on paper to make it real. It's beautiful. Can I keep it? That's why I made it silly, for you to put in your house so you remember us. As if he could forget. They colored together, Ivy chattering about constellations. Did he have a dog? No. Did he like ice cream? Yes. What was his favorite color? Blue, maybe. Mine's purple, Ivy declared. The dark purple, like nighttime. Then quieter, are you scared? The question caught him off guard. Scared of what? That you won't be able to help me. That your blood won't match. She kept coloring. I heard Mommy crying last night. She was telling Grandma she's scared the doctors won't find someone in time. The adult awareness broke Holden's heart. 5 years old, and carrying fears no child should bear. I'm terrified, Holden admitted, but being scared doesn't mean giving up. It means the outcome matters. You matter, Ivy. So much. She looked up, eyes searching his face. Will you still visit me, even if you can't help, if your blood doesn't work? Yes, every day if you'll let me, because you're my daughter, and that doesn't change based on blood types. It just is. Ivy seemed satisfied. She went back to coloring, but her small hand found his and held on tight. They were still sitting like that when the doorbell rang. That'll be my mother, Holden said. Your grandmother. She's very excited to meet you. Ivy's eyes widened. I have a grandma, a real grandma. The question revealed another hole in Ivy's life. Brooke's parents were gone, and until now she'd had no extended family at all. A real grandma who's been waiting 6 years to spoil you properly. Margaret Carmichael swept into the apartment like a force of nature, carrying bags from upscale toy stores. But when she saw Ivy peeking around the corner, all that formidable energy transformed into something infinitely gentle. Oh, Margaret breathed, her hand flying to her chest. Oh, sweetheart, look at you. Ivy pressed closer to Holden, suddenly shy. Margaret knelt down, bringing herself to the child's level with grace that belied her age. Hi, Ivy. I'm your Grandma Margaret. I've been waiting so long to meet you. Her voice trembled. Would it be okay if I hugged you? Ivy looked up at Holden, who nodded encouragingly. Then, with the resilience of children who'd learned to take comfort where they could find it, she walked into Margaret's arms. Holden watched his mother embrace his daughter, his mother who rarely showed public emotion, who maintained composure through corporate battles. She was crying openly now, holding Ivy like she might disappear, whispering things Holden couldn't hear but could imagine. All the grandmother dreams she'd held for 6 years, finally coming true in the worst possible circumstances. Brooke appeared beside him, her own eyes wet. Your mother called me this morning. She wanted to make sure it was okay to come. I don't mind. Holden watched them, seeing the Carmichael resemblance even more clearly. She's been wanting this since she saw Ivy at the wedding. The wedding that didn't happen, Brooke said quietly. Holden, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to destroy your life. You didn't destroy it. You gave me a chance to build a real one. He turned to look at her fully. Victoria and I were never right. We were just convenient, appropriate. Everything a relationship shouldn't be built on. They spent the afternoon together, an improvised family united by circumstances, but growing into something real. Margaret produced gifts that managed to be both extravagant and perfectly age-appropriate. Ivy opened each with delighted surprise, her energy building despite her fatigue. Grandma, look, it's a telescope, a real one. Ivy clutched the child-sized telescope like treasure. For star watching, Margaret explained, her voice thick with emotion. Your daddy told me you love astronomy. We'll set it up on your balcony and look at real constellations together. Can we, Mummy, can we? Brooke nodded, unable to speak through her tears. Watching Ivy receive the grandmother love she'd always deserved was both beautiful and heartbreaking, a reminder of all the years they'd missed. Around 3, Ivy's energy began to fade dramatically. The crash was visible. One moment animated, the next barely able to keep her eyes open. Brooke recognized the signs immediately, moving to Ivy's side with practiced concern. "Time for rest, baby." "But Grandma just got here," Ivy protested weakly, her small voice breaking Holden's heart. "She'll leave if I sleep." "And I'll be back," Margaret promised, kneeling beside the couch where Ivy had curled up. "Very soon. I promise you, sweetheart. This isn't goodbye, it's just see you later." "You promise?" Ivy's eyes were already drooping. "People say that, but sometimes they don't come back." Margaret's face crumpled at the casual way Ivy revealed her abandonment wounds. "I promise, on every star in the sky. Your daddy can bring me back tomorrow if you'd like." "Okay, Grandma," Ivy mumbled, already half asleep. They settled Ivy in her room, Margaret taking her turn reading the star book with a voice that shook with emotion. Holden stood in the doorway with Brooke, watching his mother and daughter, marveling at how quickly they'd bonded. When Ivy finally fell asleep, Margaret emerged with red eyes and fierce determination Holden recognized from his own childhood. The look she got when something threatened her family. "That child is a Carmichael," she declared quietly. "And Carmichaels fight. Whatever she needs, the best doctors, experimental treatments, anything, we'll make it happen. First we need to see if I'm a match. And if you're not, then we find someone who is. We search every registry, test every distant relative. That little girl is my granddaughter, and I refuse to lose her before I've had the chance to love her properly." "Aye." The conviction in his mother's voice gave Holden strength he didn't know he needed. He wasn't alone in this fight. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and Holden's heart stuttered when he saw Dr. Chen's office on the screen. It had only been 6 hours since the blood draw. Results weren't supposed to come this quickly. "I have to take this," he said, stepping into the hallway, his hand trembling as he answered. "Mr. Carmichael, this is Dr. Chen. I have your results." "Already? You said 3 to 5 days?" "We put a rush on them given Ivy's deteriorating condition." A pause that felt eternal, measured in heartbeats that echoed in Holden's ears. "Mr. Carmichael, we need you to come back to the office. Today, if possible. There's something we need to discuss about your results in person." The doctor's tone, careful, measured, not celebratory but not devastated either, told Holden nothing and everything. The ambiguity was somehow worse than bad news would have been. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. He ended the call and returned to the apartment where 3 women waited. His mother, the woman he'd once loved, and sleeping in the next room, the daughter he'd just found. They all looked at him, reading his expression with varying degrees of dread. "The results are in," Holden said, and his voice sounded strange to his own ears. "I have to go back to the clinic. Dr. Chen wants to discuss them in person." No one asked if it was good news or bad. They could all hear what he hadn't said, that it was too soon to know, too complicated to explain over the phone, too important to be anything but terrifying. "I'm coming with you," Brooke said immediately, already grabbing her purse. "Both of us are," Margaret added in a tone that brooked no argument. "We're in this together now." Holden looked toward Ivy's room, where his daughter slept peacefully, unaware that in the next hour they'd learn if her father could save her life or if they'd have to find another way to fight. "Let's go find out if I can bring my daughter home," Holden said softly, and together they walked out into the autumn afternoon toward answers that would change everything. The drive to Dr. Chen's office felt endless. Holden gripped the steering wheel while Brooke sat beside him, hands twisted together. Margaret occupied the back seat in uncharacteristic silence. None of them spoke. In minutes, they'd know if Holden could save his daughter's life. Dr. Chen was waiting in her office. She'd arranged 3 chairs. She'd known they'd come together. "Please sit." "Just tell us," Brooke said, voice cracking. "Please." "Doctor." Chen looked at Holden. Your HLA typing results came back faster than expected because we prioritized them. She paused. You're a match. Not just good, you're 10 out of 10. Extremely rare, even for biological parents. It's the best possible scenario. The words took a moment to register. I'm a match. Holden's voice sounded distant. 10 out of 10? 10 out of 10, Doctor. Chen confirmed, and now he could see hope in her expression, cautious but real. This gives Ivy the best possible chance. The compatibility is exceptional. Brooke made a sound, half sob, half laugh, and buried her face in her hands. Margaret's hand found Holden's shoulder, squeezing hard. What happens now? Margaret asked through tears. Dr. Chen explained the process. Additional screenings for Holden. Stem cell collection. Ivy's conditioning treatment, the transplant itself. Then waiting. Weeks in isolation. Months of recovery. I need you to understand this isn't a guaranteed cure. There are risks, rejection, infection, complications. But with a match this good and Ivy's age, the odds are in her favor. I'd estimate 80% chance of long-term remission. 80%. Not perfect, but so much better than the alternative. When can we start? Holden asked. Tomorrow morning for your screening. If everything checks out, we can begin Ivy's conditioning by week's end. That fast? Time is critical. Ivy's counts have been dropping. We need to act quickly. They left the office in a daze. In the parking lot, Brooke turned to Holden, her face a mess of tears and relief. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for showing up. I'm sorry for all the years. Stop! Holden pulled her into a hug. We can't change the past. We can only move forward. Margaret wrapped her arms around both of them. 3 people bound by love for a little girl fighting for her life. We need to tell her, Margaret said. Ivy deserves to know the answer is yes. They drove back to Riverside Garden together. The neighbor who'd been watching Ivy met them at the door. She woke up about 20 minutes ago, asked for her mama. She's been very quiet. Ivy was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching cartoons. When she saw them, her face lit up before uncertainty clouded her expression. Mommy, why were you crying? Then, looking at Holden, did the doctors say you can't help me? Brooke knelt in front of her daughter. Baby, the doctors called with Daddy's test results. And? Ivy's voice was so small. And they said he's a perfect match. Brooke's voice broke. The best match possible. Daddy can help you get better. Ivy looked at Holden, eyes searching his face. Really? You can really help me? Really? I'm going to give you some of my cells, and they're going to help your body get strong again. And then I won't be sick anymore. The doctors are very hopeful, Holden said carefully. It won't be easy. You'll have to be in the hospital for a while. But yes, sweetheart, this should help you get well. Ivy processed this, her small face serious. Then she launched herself at Holden, arms wrapping around his neck. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you for having the right blood. The simple gratitude broke something in Holden. He held his daughter, this miracle he'd only known for 3 days, and let himself cry. Cried for all the time they'd lost, for all the fear, and for the hope that suddenly felt possible. Margaret joined them on the couch, and Brooke sat on Ivy's other side, and for a long moment they simply held each other, a family forged in crisis but real nonetheless. 6 weeks later, Holden stood outside Ivy's isolation room, looking through the glass at his daughter. She was asleep, her head wrapped in a colorful scarf covering hair lost during conditioning. She looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, but she was alive, fighting, and her body was accepting the transplant beautifully. You can go in, the nurse said. Just gown up first. Holden went through the familiar routine. He'd done this every single day, rearranging his entire life around these visits. Hey, Starlight, he said softly as he entered. Ivy's eyes fluttered open. Daddy, you came. Every day, just like I promised. I know, she smiled weakly. You always keep your promises now. The now was telling, but she was generous enough not to hold it against him. They spent an hour together, Holden reading from the stack of books Margaret had provided. When visiting hours ended, Holden found Brooke in the family waiting room, asleep on a couch. She'd barely left the hospital, taking leave from her residency. He draped a blanket over her and sat in the chair beside the couch. She woke an hour later. "Holden, what time is it?" "Just after 8. You fell asleep." "I should check on Ivy." "She's fine. Sleeping." Holden handed her coffee from the cafeteria. "You need to take care of yourself, too." "I know. I just can't help feeling like if I leave, something will go wrong." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind they'd found over 6 weeks, co-parents united by love for their daughter. "Can I ask you something?" Brooke said. "Do you regret it? Calling off the wedding, turning your life upside down?" Holden considered. 6 weeks ago, he'd been preparing to marry Victoria. He'd had everything planned, controlled, perfect. Now he spent days in a pediatric oncology ward. He'd lost business deals. He'd become tabloid fodder. His reputation had taken hits. And yet, "I don't regret a single moment," Holden said honestly. "That life looked perfect on paper, but it was empty. I was going through motions, building something that didn't matter. This, sitting here drinking terrible coffee, this is real. This matters." "You've changed," Brooke observed. "You're not the same man I knew 6 years ago. That man was so afraid of being hurt that he hurt everyone first. Finding out about Ivy, it was terrifying and the best thing that ever happened to me. She gave me a reason to be better." They were interrupted by Dr. Chen with a tablet and an expression that made Holden's heart skip. "I have Ivy's latest results. Her white blood cell counts are normalizing. The donor cells have engrafted successfully. No signs of rejection." "That's good," Brooke asked, afraid to hope. "That's very good," Dr. Chen confirmed, smiling genuinely. "If she continues this trajectory, we can talk about discharge in another week or 2. The transplant is working. She's going to make it." Brooke dissolved into tears. Holden stood there, letting reality sink in. His daughter was going to live. 3 months later, Holden stood in Ivy's room at Riverside Garden, though not for much longer. He'd bought them a house with a backyard where Ivy could play once strong enough. Ivy sat cross-legged on her bed, hair growing back in soft curls, looking at the constellation book. "Daddy, when I'm all better, can we go camping? Real camping, where we can see the stars?" "Absolutely, as soon as Dr. Chen says you're strong enough. And will you teach me about business stuff? Like what you do at your job?" The question surprised him. "You want to learn about commercial real estate investment. I want to learn about what makes you happy. You always look happy when you talk about work." "Well, happier than you used to, out of the mouths of children. I'd love to teach you. Though I have to admit, these past few months have taught me something important." "What?" "That work isn't what makes me happy. People do. You do." Holden sat beside her. "I used to think success meant having the biggest company, the most impressive portfolio, the perfect life that looked good on paper. But real success, it's having someone who lights up when you walk in the room. It's keeping promises. It's showing up even when it's hard. Is that why you visit me every day, even though you have important meetings?" "You're my most important meeting, always." Ivy smiled and leaned against his shoulder. "I love you, Daddy. Even though you missed my first 5 years." The casual acknowledgement without anger was almost harder than accusation. "I love you too, Starlight. And I'm going to be there for every year going forward. Every birthday, every moment you need me. Promise?" "Promise." That evening, Holden met his mother for dinner. "How is our girl?" Margaret asked immediately. "Strong, healthy, asking about camping and learning about business. She's a Carmichael through and through." Margaret sipped her wine. "I'm proud of you. What you've done these past months, showing up without hesitation, that's who I always hoped you'd become." "I'm just being her father." "Yes, but you're doing it while facing criticism, gossip, business losses. You chose her over your reputation, your comfort, your carefully planned life." "It's not courage, when there's no other option worth considering," Holden said quietly. "Mom, before Ivy, I was building a life that looked successful but felt hollow. I was going to marry someone I didn't love because it made strategic sense. I was so busy protecting myself from pain that I wasn't allowing myself to feel anything real. And now? Now I feel everything. The fear when she's sick, the joy when she laughs, the guilt over missed years, the hope for her future. It's messy and complicated, and sometimes it hurts so much I can barely breathe. But it's real. It matters. She matters. Margaret squeezed his hand. That's what I've been trying to tell you for years. Life isn't about accumulating successes or protecting yourself from pain. It's about connection, about loving people even when it's risky. Driving home later, Holden thought about the man he'd been 6 months ago. That man would have seen Ivy as an obligation, a problem to be solved through money and delegation. But fatherhood, real fatherhood, had cracked him open in ways he hadn't expected, had shown him that true strength wasn't about control or protection, but about showing up, being present, loving fiercely, even when the outcome wasn't guaranteed. He'd learned that the perfect life he'd been building was a poor substitute for a real one. That business success meant nothing if you had no one to share it with. That the love of a child, freely given despite his failures, was worth more than any deal he'd ever closed. Ivy had saved his life just as surely as he'd saved hers. She'd given him a reason to be better, to be real, to be the kind of man who valued people over portfolios and presence over perfection. And as he pulled into his parking garage, Holden realized something profound. For the first time in his adult life, he wasn't planning his next move or strategizing his next success. He was simply grateful for what he had right now. A daughter who loved him, a chance to be the father she deserved, and a future built not on carefully calculated risks, but on the beautiful uncertainty of genuine human connection. That was the real gift Ivy had given him. Not the chance to be her hero, but the chance to be authentically, messily, wonderfully human. And in learning to be a father, Holden Carmichael had finally learned how to truly live.